And we are live. Hello and welcome to Fermenting Opinions. I'm your host, David Papiden. Our co-host, James McVeigh, is not here with us tonight for this hangout. It is June 12th, 2018, and we are here with Brandon, Chris, and Melissa, and we're going to be talking about a couple things that have been big in the news this week, namely the G7 summit that took place. I guess that was last week, technically. And what our takeaway is from that, and then also the rather historic events of the last essentially 24 hours, where President Donald Trump met with Kim Jong-un in Singapore, and they've signed this sort of tentative agreement. And we're going to talk about whether or not we thought that there was anything really good came from that, or if this is a huge win for. I named the title of this episode is a G7 and a whole lot of winning, or something like that, because I don't know if anyone else has watched Tropic Thunder. It's a reference to that. But let's kick it off with G7. That basically occurred last week. A lot of the major world leaders of different countries, they get together and they do this thing every year. It used to be G8, and then Russia got kicked out after the annexation of Crimea, and that was one of the topics of contention. Because during the summit, Trump sort of insisting that we should bring them back into the fold, essentially. What do we think of that? Anyone want to jump in?
Well, here's the deal.
Go ahead.
I think that, like I said when I posted, I made the comment when I posted something earlier today in the group. Keep your friends close, keep your enemies closer. Mm-hmm. I feel like kicking them out, there were valid reasons for doing so, but I feel like there might be some just as valid reasons for keeping them, under our wing, just so that, sometimes having a presence in your face kind of presence, it's not a bad thing to kind of look in your cohort's eyes, and you can kind of intimidate another person. You can also learn a lot from them being just in your presence. And if we're going to keep them outside the little circle of trust, little Meet the Fockers reference, I don't see why it would be detrimental for us to kind of keep our thumb just somewhat hovering over their heads. Just I don't know. That's just a thought.
No, that's okay. Yeah, I guess my thought is we have to ask ourselves, well, why was the annexation of Crimea? Why did that result in them being removed in the first place? I mean, I guess it's my understanding that this sort of fell in line with like other sanctions and what have you. Like we expelled a bunch of their ambassadors and officials out of our country, due to several of their past actions over the last couple of years.
Well, Russians are going to be Russians.
Yeah, Russians are going to be Russians. That's certainly true. But my understanding, this is sort of punitive. Like you don't get to sit and help influence big decisions, because part of G7, as I understand it, is these countries are working together to sort of plan their economic futures together. Is a big part of what they're doing. But we can get to some other issues with that in a minute. But like, I guess Russia being really now historically in the last several years as sort of a bad actor and an agent that sort of vitiates all of that through manipulation and deception and acts of force, and for that reason, that's my understanding is why they were removed. I'm agreeing with you, Melissa, that it's better to keep channels of communication open. I don't know if Russia has earned that yet necessarily, a right to come back to the table, essentially.
I don't know that there's anything that they can ever do. Like I said, Russians are going to be Russians. Have they ever, since the fall of the Berlin Wall and the fall of communism, have they ever given us any true reason to trust them? I mean, honestly.
I mean, I think it was better before Putin.
Well, he still got that KGB blood.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He's, I think that was the joke back when I first heard about Putin is that, he's the guy that knows where the bodies are buried because he buried them there. He is a pretty scary guy. And that kind of goes to the other point saying about, oh, you can go and intimidate. Like, you're not going to intimidate Vladimir Putin. Like, you're not. He is a stone. He is very, very much the character. If you guys watch House of Cards, the caricature of Putin essentially is the I don't know what the character's name was, but basically the same guy. He's both the fictional character and the real Vladimir Putin are very very scary people, honestly. Yeah, and I don't know if that would work with somebody like him. And if you look at Trump himself, like, you saw there was a pretty amazing picture where, that went viral about, I guess it was Angela Merkel and all these other leaders were sitting around this table, like kind of like staring down at Trump, and Trump's sitting there with his arms folded, just like, I don't know if you guys saw that or not, but I saw that, and it seemed to be sort of the big takeaway of Trump just sort of being obstinate and stuff like that. And this just goes to, whether or not, communications and negotiation is really possible if participants aren't willing. And I don't think a person like Putin is really willing or interested necessarily, that he's running his own sort of game of bringing everyone else down to his level, so to speak, in terms of, Well,
did I read somewhere, or did I just totally dream this up? But I thought I read somewhere that it would be that Putin would very much like to have a reunified Soviet Union.
I think, I don't know if they would still call it that, but I think there are, from what I understand, political hardliners that are very nostalgic about the Soviet Union and how things were back then. And he panders to them quite a bit in terms of his quote unquote platform and his policy. And just in the way he runs the country is, he's effectively an autocrat, that, he snaps his fingers and something's going to get done somewhere. He makes those things happen. And that's much more like Soviet rule, where you had the party, and the party had the power, and party made things get done. And if you didn't like it, you got disappeared somewhere, and somebody like a young Vladimir Putin would, send you off to Gulag, or, the body is buried somewhere, kind of thing. Yeah, and I think he appeals to that. I think he wants to restore that kind of power. I don't know necessarily.
Well, for that reason alone, I think that, yes, we need to be a little bit more. I don't want to say kid gloves, but I feel like because of those types of murmurings and whisperings, maybe bringing them back into the fold just for that very reason, because you don't want to have Putin on the outskirts doing things without having a little bit more of a, a little closer eye on the goings on.
I think.
What are the other countries on the summit?
I was afraid you were going to ask me that because I didn't look it up before we started. I know Germany's one. Angela
France,
Merkel,
Germany, Canada,
UK.
There's another one too. There's another couple that I'm trying to remember in there. Italy, I want to say, is in there.
I think Italy is in there.
I don't remember who. There's someone I'm missing.
Someone look it up. Someone look it up while we're talking.
I'm on it.
Because that. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to make a quick point. One thing that you also have to consider is that the Russians and the Chinese are essentially teaming up together currently to create their own economic union of sorts, a G7 or whatever you want to call it.
Japan.
All right. And if we keep Russia on the outskirts, and also by extension keep China on the outskirts, we'll end up in a situation where we have competing economic unions, a sort of first and second rate kind of, fight.
Yeah.
And China is also attempting to create a, I know this is off topic from Russia specifically, but China is also essentially creating a Silk Road of sorts, a recreation of the original Silk Road. If they're indeed successful, then by default, you will end up in a situation where you're slugging it out with potentially, a number one economic power and a number two economic power. And that type of fight. We've done that before, and hey, we won the last time, but we may not win again. So one needs to be careful who you put on the outskirts. Is in short kind of my
true
point.
And that also explains Putin's motivation for destabilizing the West, because if he's if he's playing on the B team, that's the best thing he can do is undercut the A team, in terms of their performance. And things like people like Donald Trump are really great for that with his protectionist trade practices and the tariff wars that I feel like he's getting us into. One of the things he was talking about was regards to trade tariffs with Canada, and that sort of I don't know if you want to call it a gaffe or I don't even know if that's such a thing anymore. If this is like a screw up of Trump speaking, like I don't know if we can just point to this one and say this was the gaffe versus everything else he says. It's all kind of consistent at this point. That's each big screw up is supported by so many other ones, and obviously not going to have a real strong Trump defender on this one. But he says it's a matter of national security about putting tariffs on Canada. That whole spat between him and Trudeau, what the hell? It's like anybody else have any thoughts on that? Brandon, go ahead.
Those tariffs are going to be deeply damaging to our economic structures. So I was spending some time periodically, going on CNBC where they have market analytics, not too different from, say, Bloomberg.
Yeah.
And you could just see, like, every time he makes an inflation, red, green, red, green. That's just basically how it goes down the line. And that's, a little bit on the short-term side. There's also a long-term effect here. He's going to be in office for 4 years. That's do incredible amounts of damage. Now, on the other side, I do kind of agree with him again on TPP and NAFTA. They're written; those deals are written by corporations, and they don't benefit the standard U.S. citizen by any measure.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of good and bad with both of those in the way that plays out. Overall, economically, big picture, it does, beneficial towards GDP and maybe not the Gini coefficient there so much, which is, for people who don't know what Gini coefficient is, that's essentially it's a measurement of like income disparity, essentially a wealth disparity between the highest and lowest earners in a given area. So it can be like broken down by state, like how much stratification there is. And I think one of the things he was saying that's not necessarily, these deals were not necessarily great for workers, but they were not so terrible for corporations. And I think that's all he was saying there. But see, Brandon, you said you weren't really so strong with the economic stuff. Like you're our economics guy tonight.
I still deeply disagree with that assessment.
Well, it's economics is a complex thing. It's like someone asserting that they understand quantum physics. Like if you think you really have a good handle on it, you probably don't. So I just draw that analogy. But back to Trudeau and the sort of the sensational aspect of this, in terms of all the sort of the smack talk that went down afterwards, saying, I can't remember who it was, saying Trudeau deserves a special place in hell for basically like clapping back against Trump, like after he walked off the stage. I don't know exactly the full details there, but is this just the hyper partisan news cycle, or is there something deeper here? What do you think?
It's more in the territory of hyper partisanship, but Trudeau is not exactly a perfect world leader in any sense of the word.
And I think a lot of people don't realize that
liberal icon is an absolutely terrible idea, but that's my personal opinion.
No, that's fine. Yeah, it's I think, I like him more than I dislike him, but I don't love him. I wouldn't say that he's perfect on a lot of things. Like he was okay with the hardcore environmentalists. He approved the pipeline. He was all good with that and the effects that it would have had. So I think sometimes people don't fully examine those things. I'm sorry. Go ahead,
I've got Canadian friends on both sides of the political spectrum, and not all of my Canadian friends, but a couple of my handfuls on either side have all basically the opinion that he's nothing but a limp noodle. So,
he is a limp noodle. Yeah.
What else is that? What else is that based on?
You're talking about Trudeau?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's okay. That's my little Southern perspective. I feel like he's all for show. I feel like he's the evil stepmom who loves their kid in public, and then behind closed doors, they just like they don't there. I could be totally wrong, by the way. I really don't have a lot to base that on. Just he's too perfect to me. Like in public, it's all. I'm in show business, and I'm like, dude, you can't play me. Like it's planned out, every angle, every detail. Obama was the same way.
Yeah,
to me, Trump has tons of flaws, but to me, I'm trying in my optimistic mood. To me, don't pay attention to the small words and semantics or whatever. He's sticking a finger to the establishment to me, and I think that's what all the coal mining towns have bought into, and they feel empowered. Now, whether it's fully right or wrong, I'm not saying. I live out here in the country, and I'm surrounded by Trump nuts. So, but they're good people at heart. I mean, they're the people that would save you. You know, if you were bleeding on the side of the road, they would do anything for you deep down. So,
I think you have it's a really good point, actually, and I think it's one of the reasons why we do these hangouts and try to have these conversations. You know, we try to keep them a little bit more informal in that, but like. I hear what you're saying is like, oh, because especially right after the election, it was like, oh, you voted for Trump. You're a horrible human being. You're
a racist.
You're a piece of crap. You're a racist. You're all of the worst things that the worst kind of Trump supporter is. And that's not necessarily the case. Some people are just sick of the establishment. Some people are sick of feeling like, you know, our leaders have, you know, like you said, have sort of a crafted public persona, and that's not what they're really like. And you know, it's all smoke and mirrors kind of thing. I mean, to an extent, I can empathize with that. I don't know how far that really goes with, because I was an Obama guy. I voted for him twice. I don't regret it. But like, I think there's some of that there still, that there's a crafted image that you definitely do not get with Trump. That because he's so unfiltered and he's so graphic. You know, and so openly flawed that you're thinking, oh, well, this is, you know, what you see is what you get kind of thing. But I think, and I will never credit him with playing 3-dimensional chess. Like this is all some part of his master plan. But I think he knows how to, I think he has a good cunning in terms of how to appeal to people. And by being unfiltered and unscripted, and the way he engages, you know, in these petty, like the Rocket Man shit with Kim Jong-un, and like all these things, you know, that he does that are like, you know, really just deeply unprofessional for a president.
Hey, I'm so glad you said that real fast, because I'll probably be devil's advocate here, but
that's fine.
I'm totally happy with him disrespecting Kim, whatever, on the public stage. This man has murdered 1 million+ people. You know what I'm saying? Under his watch. And why are we going to let him parade around like he's some world leader? He has no seat at any table as far as I'm concerned. I mean, I'm happy that they're doing what they're doing, you know, like it's better than the alternatives, but this guy deserves no respect.
So I think that's really interesting that you say that, actually, because that does kind of, I don't know if we wanted to say anything else about G7, because we could just segue at this point.
I have nothing more to say about it.
Yeah, because I spent less time on G7 myself. Like, oh, Trump's. That's one of the funny things is, like, you know, yes, Trump says, you know, embarrassing things to me as a fellow human being and as American and stuff like that. But like, you know, it makes a fool of himself on the world stage. Okay, fine. What else is new? Some people love it, some people hate it. But this, I think, what happened here with Kim Jong-un is, I think, significantly larger. And I don't know. I haven't entirely made up my mind about it. I had a conversation about it early this morning. I was pretty obstinate, and I've been doing some thinking since then. But the thing you said, Chris, about Kim Jong-un and just what a tyranny is, and I don't know specific. I don't have numbers on the death toll he's responsible for, but his country is in Trump's terms a shithole, and you know things have been really bad there. He's a murderous tyrant. You know, I brought up an anecdote earlier where, you know, he had one of his officers or something like that dozed off during a meeting, and he had him executed with an anti-aircraft gun. Like, this is, and that was an AP story. That's not, you know, some made up thing that, but if anyone's listening to this and they want to check me on that, please do. But that's one thing that I remember reading, that Kim Jong-un doesn't deserve our respect. He's a murderous tyrant. And now there's talks of inviting him to the White House, that Trump's going to go to North Korea, that they're going to be, you see in the meeting in the summit in Singapore, you see Kim Jong-un, patting Trump on the back like they're buddies now. You're saying that Kim doesn't deserve any respect. He doesn't deserve any seat at the table. But that's exactly, I think, what this summit accomplished, was legitimizing him on the world stage, that he's got a seat at the table now. He met the president of the United States. They shook hands. They smiled. They talked about what a great achievement it was. Mm-hmm. And do we want a denuclearized, what they call Korean Peninsula? Oh, absolutely we do. But I haven't seen, I guess just my reservations to put out there is we haven't seen any indication that they're actually going to do that. My understanding from these, I almost want to call them accords or not, this agreement that they have is that essentially that North Korea is going to return the remains of some POWs or fallen soldiers, during the Korean War. And in exchange that we are canceling our war games in the area, and they're made a commitment towards the goal of denuclearization, which isn't, that's like saying we're going to strive together kind of thing. Like that actually hasn't accomplished. There's no meat to that. You know what I mean?
Well, can I say something about that, though, David?
Do.
I think that when you're looking at a character like Kim Jong-un, you cannot go into these discussions with an all or nothing kind of attitude, because we all know he's petulant and he's petty and he's got small man syndrome. He's, trying to have some legitimacy at the big boys table. So I think that if this is in fact the way that it's going to play out, this is a first step in many, many steps to a palatable end to the situation.
A palatable, yeah.
Palatable end, yeah. I don't see that just this one meeting would have been beneficial for Trump to go in there, guns blazing and demanding everything that we do want for North Korea to agree to. I think there's got to be a little bit of a dog and pony show, whether that looks bad on the world stage or not. Go ahead and give little man a little bit of a dog and pony show if it means that, you know what I'm saying? Because and I saw this earlier. I forgot where I saw this, but this is something to consider too. Back before it was Kim Jong-il, it was Kim Jong-sun, Kim Jong-un's grandfather, Kim Il-sung. And at the time in the 50s when all of this was going on, there was no need or interest in the travel world. The world is changing now, and the generations have a vested interest in the Western world, whether it be internet communication, whether it be, blue jeans, whether it be any of the trappings of, the things that China now appreciates and has become accustomed to, the things that back in the 80s that were smuggled and bootlegged into Russia. It's just one of those trickle-down kinds of things. So if we have to do a little bit of a dog and pony with Little Man, Rocket Man, to kind of grease the skids, as it were, to get to a point where we're going to entice them with these little bits of the breadcrumbs to get them to where we want them to. Sometimes you've got to be the agent of subterfuge to get to the good stuff.
Right. So allow me to piggyback off of that a little bit, and
please do.
Unfortunately, I'm going to go at length, and it's my general apologies for that. So one of the things you got to also note with him is if you watched the meeting between Yoon and Moon Jae-in of South Korea, you notice that they went over to the South Korean side of the DMZ and then unexpectedly went over to the north. That wasn't supposed to happen. That was not pre-planned. Well, only by Yoon. Yoon is not a stupid person. You're dealing with someone who is fairly astute. You cannot underestimate him. And to a general extent beyond that, though he's a tyrant and though he's done all these horrible things, You want to keep these people at the table, because if you don't, then you don't have an opportunity to grow an economic relationship, which could also prevent war from happening. It's one of the best reasons, why you keep someone like China or Russia at the table. Mm-hmm. Because the more economically tied we are, the less likely we are to go to war. Like, for example, say in China's case, the South China Sea, in Russia's case their military actions in Europe. And so it's very much in a similar case with North Korea. You don't want to go to war with them. They're a nuclear power. Whether you like it or not, they pretty much achieved everything that they wanted to achieve. And there is no reason for them to not be taken seriously, because they should be. There's very few nuclear powers left in the world. There's not that many in the grand scheme of things. So it's very important to keep that negotiating process coming along. And so that means you're going to have multiple, sit-down meetings and things like that. And it's not going to be like immediate gratification, so to speak.
Right.
You're not just going to get everything that you want.
Right. Yeah. And I think I'd have to agree with what Melissa said a little bit ago about, like, this wasn't going to be the be all end all, that they're going to pass some binding thing with some meat on it about, denuclearization and making sure that they're not, working on their capabilities or anything like that. That was going to come out of the very first meeting. This is just, hey, let's not kill each other, kind of a initial meet and greet kind of thing. Yeah. And I mean, in that term, that seems reasonable enough. But I guess one thing I would want to point out is normally a first meeting like this comes after some kind of thing has been achieved and not before, because this is like, legitimizing Un and, showing that he has a seat at the table, kind of thing, that comes as the reward for the thing that he does, essentially. And that's what incentivizes him to do that sort of thing.
I don't know that it necessarily gives him, I don't know that it quote unquote legitimizes him. I think that what it is providing or extending a false sense of importance to him. It's kind of like, a bait and switch almost. It's like, okay, we'll talk. We'll legitimize your stance. I don't know that necessarily going to meet him is giving that kind of deference to him. I think that, sometimes you got to put on, like I call it, a dog and pony show to,
Right.
Well, sure. It's like whining and dining kind of thing. I mean, I get that. I get that perspective. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, you can't.
I want to jump on Brandon's point. Brandon, didn't you say that he's pretty well educated, which I would believe?
He is fairly well educated. I mean, he went to multiple various schools across Switzerland. He's not terribly stupid or anything. I mean, he is someone who's fairly astute compared to, say, if you compare him to Il and Kim Il-sung, the previous leaders of North Korea, who were kind of, so to speak, big men with big sticks within their own countries, which is doesn't necessarily always operate like that.
What if reason is prevailing? What if reason is prevailing in this scenario?
Well, here's the thing. Un already has all the developmental pieces not only put together, but in place to fire ICBMs at the United States. He's achieved his goal. So what reason would he not have for negotiating at this point? Because he's already got where he needs to be.
That was one of the that was one of the things that I heard sort of leading up to. I don't know what that sound is. Somebody's dog drinking water.
It's mine.
All right. Okay. I was like, that is an unusual sound. No. Yeah. I think it was sort of postulated that one of two things, that either North Korea is on the brink of economic collapse, or they have the nuclear capabilities. And they can hit us if they want to, or try to hit us if they want to. And so now they've got the big bargaining chip, or they're trying to not look like they're hat in hand, because they blew their own ass off with their nuclear testing site. That whole thing with the mountain range, and they showed all that geologic activity. And they're suspecting that might be, the real reason is that they're running out of options and now they have to play nice. It's either that or they can hit California or something. And I don't know how we made a determination as to which one that was. Brandon, do you know? Do you have any more on that?
So here's some determining factors. Multiple defense analysts throughout both CIA, NSA, and FBI, or basically all the big 3-letter triad people that we just love so much for tracking us in our every move. There's essentially all pretty much come to unanimous agreement that they at least have all the parts necessary to get ICBMs off the ground and to the United States. The question is, can you do it from a scientific standpoint? Are you all the way there in your science? Is your science done right?
Gotcha. So they have all the.
That's where the issue is.
They got all the parts to build the rocket. Essentially, that doesn't mean that it won't. It won't necessarily hit its target, kind of thing, or blow up up on the launch pad, which might have been what happened. So yeah, I don't know. I guess we're gonna have to leave that as a question mark for now. I'll have to remain agnostic as to what is actually motivating this. But one thing I would want to put out there as an argument is a lot of people who are and can't say Trump gets nothing out of this, or in terms of credit. I won't go there just yet, but in terms of he got Kim Jong-un to blank with his angry tweeting. I think that is probably the least possible of all reasons why this is happening, is the fact that Trump made quasi-threatening tweets about buttons and rocket men. I really don't think for someone who is either completely insane as a dictator or who's actually a pretty crafty, well-educated guy. I don't think if he's either of those things or some combination of the two, I don't think he's going to be persuaded to agree to at least outwardly agree to denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula because Donald Trump tweeted. I think that's a preposterous argument. Personally, I don't know, Melissa, do you want to push back on that or not? Or
well, I'm just sitting here thinking. I don't know that, and I'm trying to phrase this properly. I don't know that I believe that anything that Donald Trump tweets about foreign affairs is meant to kind of opinion or pushback from any foreign power. I really honestly feel like he tweets that bullshit out because it plays to his following. And I don't know that anybody in a position of power, leadership power, operating power, I don't think anybody really takes any of that to heart and seriously. I think that if you're going to, I just find it hard to believe that Un would be worried about what Trump says in a tweet. Honestly, yeah. I mean, that just I find it hard to believe that any foreign power, that their leader would be, concerned at all about what Trump said on Twitter. So yeah. I think that's more of a show than it is, serious. I mean, I don't take it serious.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, I hardly ever. First, hang on a second, Brandon. I don't know if that's you typing or whatever, but could you mute yourself because you sound like angry Kermit the Frog when someone's talking smack on the internet. It's like it sounds like super loud. No, it's okay. No, you're probably looking.
I already finished.
Oh, okay, okay.
I want to throw something out on that.
Go ahead, Chris.
Do you guys remember in the last year or two, Dennis Rodman, the basketball player, has been making trips over there?
Dennis was there.
So to me, that's a special invitation from Kim or whatever. To me, it's symptoms of someone who wants to be more involved in the real world. Wants to just drop the facade, maybe not immediately, but slowly bring his people up to speed. Hopefully, if America can make him look good in it and not dethrone him, great. And I don't know. That's just what I'm sensing, but maybe not.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I could, whether or not I want to throw an attaboy at Trump. I'd be kind of desperate not to actually, in all of this. But with regards to the actions that appear to be taking place, at least, unless I'm deliberately being overtly cynical, it's better that they're at least talking about denuclearizing than not, right? It's better that we're not going to war with North Korea where a bunch of people are going to die, right? I mean, that's, especially our people, especially if they have a nuclear weapon, they can actually hit the United States.
South Koreans.
Yeah, South Koreans are probably really damn happy about it. China's pretty happy about it right now, as I understand it. Like that is going to be a better outcome. And I guess one of the things I was saying, I was having a conversation with Haley this morning, and she will hopefully be joining us, but I don't know. And she's absolutely adamant that Trump deserves as much credit for this, and that was sort of what I'm.
Wait, say that again. He deserves what kind of credit?
Just deserves credit for bringing this together. And
Haley said that.
Haley said that. She's like, he deserves credit, and I'm like, no, like it's not possible. I think he'll be credited. But again, I think there was factors going beyond, his bluster that made that happen. But it's good that he's willing to talk. It's good that this is hopefully the beginning of a process of denuclearization. Yeah. If he, if through no fault of his own this gets screwed up, then I won't fault him for it necessarily. I hope he doesn't cock it up himself. But we'll see essentially moving forward. But in this, I'm going to segue just briefly into something else that a lot of people, we'll say a lot of people on the left, are bringing up the idea that we stepped out of the the Iran nuclear deal. That, and this is going back to what Brandon was saying, is that isn't it better to keep these people at the table, better to negotiate with them? It's sort of been the theme of tonight, talking about Russia, G7, and and Kim Jong-un and North Korea. That we're talking, and that's better than not talking. We did pull out of the Iran nuclear deal, and we really don't. There's nothing really to incentivize them now, in terms of not going starting back up the centrifuges essentially, and everyone cheered when we went out of it because it's a bad deal because it's going to expire one day. It was actually a much more thorough. I don't know if you want to call it a treaty or.
Well, one thing I had a problem with about that whole deal with Iran is that the whole advance warning. You give anybody advance warning, they can do anything, and they're not stupid. They can go and do what they need to do to kind of camouflage if they are doing something against the agreement. I think the problem that most Americans had with that agreement was that the whole with advance notice, we weren't able to just go unannounced and tour facilities and see what was up. I think that was part of the whole. I mean, one of the issues with the whole bad deal scenario.
Chris, your dog is so loud.
Oh God, I'm so sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. I don't know if you guys hear that as loud as I do, but I said, I've got this mixing board, and it's like it's like blasting in my ears. But anyway, not a huge deal. But yeah, if you guys got other things going on, please just mute your mics, because it's not great television. But Melissa, I guess to respond to what you were saying is I can understand why people have certain issues with certain aspects of the deal, like advance warning, or that the deal was going to expire after a certain number of years. That there was things that were less than ideal about it. I think that was, but I guess to return to what Brandon was saying earlier is like, well, if we're trying to keep Iran at the table, just like we're talking about what a great idea it is to keep North Korea at the table and get Russia back to the table. That if these are things that we can agree are on a long enough timeline, better rather than worse, isn't just pulling out like full stop. Isn't that worse than saying, okay, well, we need to go back in and renegotiate some of this stuff instead of just kicking sand in Iran's face, essentially.
Was there an ongoing dialogue regarding that deal with Iran? Was there an ongoing dialogue beyond before we pulled out of the whole situation? Was there an ongoing dialogue between the two countries?
Not as far as I know. I think
see that right Trump there is different.
Trump was fulfilling a campaign promise, essentially. He was saying that he was going to get us out of the terrible Iran nuclear deal. And he just, that was and again, if someone wants to push back on this, if they want to criticize what I'm saying, is it really just appeared to be a matter of him tossing red meat to his base by doing all the things that he said he was going to do.
Well, one thing I will say about, it may be fulfilling a campaign promise, but sometimes if you've got quote unquote bad deal, whether it be between two countries or between two persons, sometimes you can't just renegotiate the terms of a deal. Sometimes you do have to go, okay, let's scrap it. Let's start all over. I haven't been following enough to know if there has been anything that's, going to pick back up again. Sometimes if you just say, you know what, start from ground zero, start from scratch, sometimes that's a lot easier and more advantageous than trying to put Band-Aids and liquid paper over an existing situation.
Right. I think it would, even if you're going to renegotiate something, it's to say we're going to come up with a new deal together because we're not satisfied with this one. We all need to come back to the table and negotiate versus I'm tearing up this deal that, that the United States, not Barack Obama and not John Kerry, I believe it is, not their deal, but that was the United States deal with Iran, and we tore it up. And there's no real, that wasn't a part of a renegotiating promise. It was just us tearing it up and walking and tossing the pieces in there and walking away. And I guess the idea is to get them to come back to us and say, they're going to offer something better. I mean, maybe is that the order of the deal? Like, is that what that's supposed to look like? I mean, because it seems like it's playing chicken with a lot of people's lives. Playing chickens, that's.
I guess I'll be the devil's.
Go ahead, do it.
One of the things I side with Sam Harris on some of these issues. Some of these countries like Iran are just barbaric on it still, and it's like, get the fuck up with the modern times or get off, And finally, we got a leader that, as stupid as he is, he lets the military do their job, and he knows we got some bad boys ready to go. And, I'm not advocating war. I'm seriously not. And I'm not a Republican, and I did not vote Trump. But damn it, man. Like, I'm sick of us, treating these nations like they deserve a seat at anything. Fuck Iran. Fuck Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, I'm certainly not a fan of either of those governments, and I'm on record numerous times saying, fuck the Saudi government, and I'm happy to say it again, fuck the Saudi government.
If you're gay in that country, you're dead.
Yeah, pretty much, exactly. Or an atheist actually. But again, it comes back to, I can't remember what that poem was. It was about the Holocaust, about when they came for the trade unionists, I didn't do anything because.
And then when they came for me, there was no one there.
And it goes through this progression, and then when they came for me, there was no one else, there was no one left to stand up for me. So that's why I look at other people that tend to be marginalized. If they can do to them, and if I don't stand up for them, then there's not going to be anybody around when it comes time to stand up for me. I guess except me. And that tends not to work out so well for the individual. But anyway, these governments are still pretty horrible. I'm not necessarily advocating regime change because I don't think that's been proven to work all that well either.
Sorry.
No, go ahead, Brandon.
Though these governments are terrible and they do absolutely horrifying things, the alternative is they do horrible to all the countries that surround them. A great example would be Iraq during the Desert Storm.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot afford to have countries like that lash out. And so you have to keep them at the table. Now, Saudi Arabia, we have a special little relationship with them, and that relationship needs to go the way of the dodo. But, when you're talking about Iran, there's some history there. There's some reason why they don't like us.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, we meddled. We helped create the situations that we're dealing with the fallout now. And hopefully that fallout will never be literal fallout. But this is again the thing about yes, they're awful government. North Korea, awful. We're talking about a lot of nations that are have really bad reputation with us, and just with regards to human rights and and all these other things, the character of these governments, and the personalities in charge of them. Like, yeah, they're all bad. They're all horrible. You know, I'm sure there are people saying that about us right now, and I don't think that necessarily be wrong. But you know, with these other countries, we were keeping them at the table. We were negotiating because we don't necessarily want it to come to, you know, to warfare, and we were doing that consistently in other places, at least recently, and not with Iran. Like, there's a lot. It's intention in terms of, you know, the policy. It's inconsistent, and that was something a lot of people, you know, a lot of the left leaning talking heads were pointing out, is that we're looking at this today with Korea as this big win by getting them back to the table, and in Iran we essentially flipped the table over, and yet we're cheering. We, as I guess Trump supporting America, we, you know, are cheering at both things, even though the logic is completely inconsistent.
Well, it's like apples and oranges. I mean, you can't compare the two situations.
I mean, on the, you know, on the MO of keeping people at the table and negotiating and what have you.
Well,
I mean, yeah, obviously the nuts and bolts of, you know, the different countries and our different histories with them. Yeah, obviously they're not going to be exactly the same thing. But in terms of, would we rather negotiate with these people, or would we now rather, you know, push ourselves towards armed conflict? You know, and it seems like in every place other than Iran that, you know, we're making strides to do that. And even talking about like Russia and bringing them back. You know, we're okay with all that, but with Iran, it was just tear it up, which, you know, again, it's inconsistent. But
I guess for me, and you know how old I am, and I grew up. Well, I was born in 1970, so I grew up with the Cold War, being a very real and imminent threat. Before that, my parents lived in a world where they conducted bomb raid drills in the schools. So I think that through all of that drama, for the most part, I don't think that the United States and Russia, given what we understand from Nagasaki and Hiroshima, would engage in a nuclear conflict with one or the other. Before we started disarming back, you know, decades ago, what was it? We had enough nuclear devices to destroy the world hundreds of times over.
something
I think,
like that, yeah.
yeah. So I think that, you know, we as Russians and Americans have a little bit more cognizance of the destructive nature of what that would do globally. Now, with regard to someone like North Korea, there are people that say that they've got enough capacity now to attack the majority of the lower 48. I don't know if that's factual or not, but it's certainly not something that I want to take a chance and find out about. But I think that a player like North Korea wouldn't have that forethought that Russians and Americans, and, you know, even Great Britain, France, Germany, you know, whatever the powers you want to throw in there, would have. I think that for them, it's not a matter of, you know, how much. I don't think that they have the same perspective that we do, having gone through the Cold War. Iran, I don't know what I think about their leaders to say definitively one way or the other, but I do not fear the Middle East right now as much as I fear the Korean Peninsula and the ties that the North Koreans have with China. I feel like that's honestly a greater threat, that and the instability of Putin leading Russia. I think those are far more pressing on me than it is than Iran and the Middle East, personally. I personally wouldn't want to cross Israel. I think Israel is perfectly capable of what do they call their defense system? The something dome, the
Iron Dome.
The Iron Dome. I think I'd stand behind that son of a gun any day of the week and trust that I would be safe. I think right now where we're focusing our foreign attention is where it needs to be focused.
Yeah, I'm not saying. Go ahead, Brandon. Go ahead.
Man, I'm sorry. I keep interrupting you rudely. My apologies.
No. It's fine. I mean, you can't. I mean, there's a lull in the conversation, and somebody wants to jump in. So like, it just happens,
Right.
and I'm happy to yield to you guys anytime.
Well, part of the reason is because I had the mute button on and I turn it off every time I start talking. So in general regards to North Korea, I mean, their general perspective seems to be nuclear weapons as an insurance policy, and it's a pretty damn good insurance policy when you look at the history. So Gaddafi gave up his nuclear weapons, and he got bodied by his own people, basically. And then, Iraq gave up their nuclear weapons program, and we destroyed the shit out of them. And so the North Koreans have been watching. They're not stupid. They're going to do whatever they can to ensure the longevity of their regime. For however long they can get away with that. And so that's the reason why they even started the development process in the first place. And then you got, Iran, in their case, they're just, is quite a bit terrifying, for nuclear weapons development. So we definitely need to engage with them. I'd say the place of concern right now is South China Sea, because there's far too many players involved there. You got Japan, you got Vietnam, Malaysia, and China, and I know I'm leaving out a few people. All basically fighting with each
over
other.
the islands and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, over various islands. So that is deeply problematic. If there's anything to be afraid of, it's that conflict going hot.
I would, if there were ever to be, God forbid that it ever happened, if there ever were World War III, I see it have against Genesis in the South China Sea area as opposed to the Middle East. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, you could be. I mean, we're all just speculating here, but I mean, that could be totally accurate. I mean, it may come from, a place none of us are really expecting or paying that much attention, because you don't hear that much about it. I honestly don't. Other than I know that there is, squabbling and fighting and some territorial posturing over some of those various islands and the resources in them. Like other than that, I don't know too much about it myself, because we're all focused on Russia and China, North Korea, and Iran and all that stuff. So like, yeah, I don't know. We could just wait and find out, I guess.
Well, the thing with the South China Sea is there's plenty of oil there, so there's a damn good reason to fight for it. Yeah,
it's interesting, Brandon, that you brought up Vietnam, because that wouldn't have been a country that I would have lumped into that conglomeration. It's interesting that you bring them up.
Right. Yeah. And it's mostly because of their military actions in that region. So what they've been doing is they've been flying. I don't remember what model plane it is, but it's equivalent to essentially B-57s over the South China Sea consistently. And they've made territorial claims to parts fairly close to their shores.
Gotcha. Okay.
So.
Yeah. Well, and that kind of interests me, because my dad just in January moved to Phnom Penh, Cambodia. And I don't think a lot of people were aware of how involved Laos and Cambodia were in the Vietnam War.
Right.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, for people who didn't, our memories are short, especially these days, it seems like. But yeah, that was definitely a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and may I mind you, Vietnam is still in quotation marks, in the same way that you would describe China, a communist country.
Yeah,
but they aren't really technically.
Yeah.
I mean, like massive air quotes around that.
Oh, but they still love Uncle Ho.
I mean, don't they call North Korea? What is it? The Democratic something?
Democratic People's Republic of Korea.
Yeah, which is
DPRK.
Yeah. Which is hilarious. Like every time, because I've read DPRK, but you forget after a while that the word Democratic is actually in there because there's about
that's the same thing
zero that's
that was
Democratic about the way they run that country.
I mean, they even have a constitution, which I find hilarious.
Yeah,
it was the same thing with East Germany.
Yep.
Yeah.
I thought the North Koreans deep down hated the Chinese from back in the Korean War.
No, the Chinese sided with the North Koreans and
actually.
But
I thought Kim, or who was the senior grandpa, the hero? I thought he was
Kim Il-sung.
Yeah, I thought he was touted for kicking back the Americans, but then getting rid of the Chinese after that as well, and making North Korea independent. Maybe I'm wrong. I could be wrong.
No. Essentially, kind of how that worked is he kind of started a relationship with Mao Zedong to try and get nuclear materials.
Yeah.
From them. And so a lot of what he did is, he would say bad things about the Chinese, just like he said the bad things about the Japanese. But like in the end, he had, diplomatic back channels in which he was essentially using to try and, get any materials or training for scientists, to try and start his nuclear program.
Yeah, because Americans were fighting Chinese soldiers in Korea too in the Korean War, right?
Right,
some of their
because
fighters
what happens
too,
is we push them all the way to where the border between North Korea and China is, and the Chinese poured over the border and tried to push them all the way back. Now, may I mind you, there was actually a crazy plan by what's his name? I don't remember what the general was, but his plan was essentially to bomb all the areas with nuclear weapons across from that border zone between North Korea and China, so that way they could not jump across, and then he could trap them in that area and basically push them up against the wall.
Wow.
So, you want to talk about a crazy war? That war is absolutely nuts. Like, the amount of stuff that we don't know about that war is crazy. We also used a lot of napalm in that war.
Yeah, I mean, they call Korea like the Forgotten War too, so like.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It totally is, yeah.
Nobody talks about it.
I know. If you guys ever get a chance to visit DC, they have a Korean War memorial there, and it is you should definitely go at night because it is one of the most eerie because it's a bunch of mock-ups of not mock-ups, the statues of soldiers, fitted out, as U.S. soldiers, in the battle gear of Korea. And they're a little bit taller than like actual humans. There might be like 7 feet tall each or something like that. And they're all arranged throughout this field. And the way they have lights and stuff on them, it creates the most haunting sort of impression. So if you guys ever get to go up there to see it, definitely, because there's so many museums and monuments and memorials and things like that in DC. If you guys ever get to go, but definitely check out the Korean War Memorial. It's really special. So.
Speaking of the Korean War, real quickly, I believe I read the statistic somewhere, and I don't remember where, so unfortunately I can't provide sourcing. I think it was 17 out of the 22 cities in North Korea were completely leveled during the Korean War, or something like that.
I had never heard that.
So, I mean,
again, Forgotten
War. We
did
a lot of damage in that war. There's a reason why they haven't liked us for a long time.
A lot of history there. Yeah. Did you guys have anything else? I feel like we're wrapping up here. Any closing thoughts? Chris,
like I've always said with Donald Trump, I always take a wait and see stance with anything he does. So I'm just going to wait and see what happens with regard to these talks. I think it is, it's historic, obviously, but I think that I've seen some people losing their mind. And I think, I'm not a Trump fan, but for crying out loud, the man could cure cancer, and the far left would find reason to criticize even that. And I think that a lot of it stems from just pure unadulterated hatred over Donald Trump being the president. I think we just all need to kind of adopt let's wait and see before we have a knee-jerk tribal response over anything. I have a hard time believing that Donald Trump made it this far in life by being a blithering idiot. I don't like the man, but I mean, wait and see. He may turn out to be, he may surprise us all. He may be just, a freaking Willy Wonka of the politic world. I don't know.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Brandon, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I've done this for like the 1200th time. I'm sorry.
It's fine.
So, two things real quickly as kind of my general closing notes. First, treat all ideas like things within a box that you can change out at any time. And then the second thing would be that always avoid, whenever possible, creating totem poles of the opposing side.
Okay.
Yes, I agree.
That's your final word?
Well, my final word would be, remember that for a brief period in time in history, after World War II, America was the only nation in the world that had nuclear weapons, and we did not use them on anyone after Japan. And can any of these other nations say the same if the tables had been turned? And at the end of the day, America is the good guys of the world. We're not perfect, but we're the best.
From sea to shining sea.
America.
America.
Yeah, I mean, I want us to be the good guys. I don't think we're always the good guys.
Agreed.
I think we can be in our better moments when we feed the better angels of our nature, so to speak.
Yeah.
And nurture them. I think we certainly can be. I think there are things to be, like you said, take a wait and see attitude towards this. We can be cautiously optimistic that this is an improvement over the situation, because maybe they got a nuke up their sleeve, or maybe there is going to be economic. We don't know necessarily. But better to talk about denuclearization than to keep threatening each other with war. I think it's a better trajectory. Whether or not to give Trump an attaboy for this, again, that'll be a wait and see.
Yes.
I think again, my final thought is with regards to that is, he got us here by existing in the White House when this probably would have happened anyway. And I am saying that as a partisan, and I am having to acknowledge my own bias and anti-Trumpness when I say that. Maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe he's really doing something that's going to be better. I don't particularly think so. But I'm willing to acknowledge if I can be shown to be wrong there. Yeah, and G7 was still an embarrassment. And those are my final thoughts on it. Thank you guys for coming out. I really enjoyed the discussion. It was fun to talk about these things. We don't talk about current events like on this kind of stage as much as what we used to. We used to do this pretty regularly. And I am trying to get back to that, but our schedule right now with all our interviews and stuff like that has been really hectic. We've been interviewing a lot of candidates, have been making podcast episodes of that. Tomorrow, hopefully we're still on for tomorrow. Anthony Magnabosco of Street Epistemology fame, I guess you could say, is going to be joining us for an interview. We're going to be talking a little bit about what that is. And hopefully we'll be dropping that episode by the end of the week. If you guys want to check us out on iTunes and Beyond Pod and Stitcher, Spreaker, all those places where you get your podcast stuff. Obviously here on our channel, if you're watching this now, or hopefully will, because I haven't seen a lot of viewers pop up on the thing. But we have a channel, we have a Facebook page and group. There's all the places that you can find us. Special shout out as always to Ross James at jamesmedia.com. Please check out his stuff. He does his own podcast, actually several. But all that said, I'm David Papiden. Thank you guys for joining us. We're Fermenting Opinions, and we'll see you next time.
Good night.
Mm-hmm.